Hi, everyone. Happy lunchtime. I hope you've got your lunch ready. Thank you for joining us today for the last interview, a mayoral candidate interview in our series of our campaign, Women Front and Center. We are very excited and very lucky to have with us today mayoral candidate Ray McGuire. We're going to ask him some questions that come from the poll that all of you participated in on the issues that matter to you. And we're going to get straight to that. Remember, early voting starts on June 12th. I think that today or tomorrow is the last day to register to vote. Someone should check that, because if you're not registered yet, you've still got time. And the primary is, election day is June 22nd. Okay. Ray, if you would love to join us, we would love to have you.
I am here. How are you?
Very, very well. It's so good to see you. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you lately. You've been so busy on the campaign trail, but earlier on, we had a chance to talk and had such a great conversation, and it was so clear how important issues that matter to women and to mothers and to families are, and I'm hoping that our members and our audience will get to hear that from you directly today. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy, hectic schedule now at such a crazy time of the campaign.
Well, listen, I'm really excited to be here. So thank you, National Organization for Women, and thank you. I'm just excited about this. So we can share whatever you'd like to share with so many extraordinary women.
Yes. So we wanted to start with a couple of just lighthearted questions so that people can get to know you a little bit. And some of the things that we came up with is, what is the most common misperception you believe voters have about you? And what is it that you want them to know about you instead?
You know, I would say there are probably many. People think I just parachuted into this city, which is not the case. So I'll come to that a little bit. But people should know I'm like really funny. People think I'm like this really serious person, but I think I could probably take my show on the road. The comedy club is going to open up here soon, and so I think I should probably be one of the first big hits there, so that people can understand that I like really. I mean, I laugh at myself, and others laugh at me on occasion. So I would say that would be one. The other is that people try to categorize me solely as a Wall Street guy, but I got a lot of layers. That's what I've done in my career, but who I am has a large part to inform what people should know. I've been a private public servant for over 4 decades. Sitting on the board of De La Salle Academy and Harlem School of the Arts to make certain our kids get access to quality education and develop a love for learning. I've helped build nurses stations in Harlem so that our essential workers have the facilities they need to save lives. I've served on the board of the Whitney Museum and the Studio Museum of Harlem to make certain that we elevate the brilliance of women and artists of color, just to name a few. So I've been deeply involved in this. Private public servant is it's what my lovely wife, better what his wife says I've done. And so, that's a little bit different to the perception. And also, I got here based on my 95-year-old mother's sacrifices. I come from the neighborhood. I just didn't parachute into this. So there would be a few perceptions that people who knew me would say, yeah, that's Ray. And people who don't know me would say, is that Ray? So that's how I would respond to that.
Well, I'm so glad that you took the time to let people know that. That's really important. What about your?
You want me to tell a joke? You want me to tell a joke? I better hold off on that.
You can close with one.
I can hold off on that one.
What's one thing you change about your life in New York City? It can be as can be simple and silly, or it can be serious.
I would say probably 2 things. One, I took my bike out the other day and figured out there weren't many places for me to go get air in the tires. So I'd probably, given that we got more bikes around, I'd probably get more filling stations for bike tires. That's number one. But on the more serious note, I would see that the cultural institutions are more accessible to more New Yorkers than they are today. They give us such richness. They inspire us. They teach us. They inform us. And I want more New Yorkers to have access to the cultural institutions in ways that today they don't. So I would change that. I'd change that immediately.
Wonderful. When did you become a feminist or realize you were a feminist?
When my wife told me that's what I was. I don't know. I've been a feminist all my life. What do you mean when I become one? This is not nothing. New people now brand you. I'm a feminist. Okay, if that's what I am, then that's like Howard Cosell, the great Howard Cosell, asked Muhammad Ali once. He said, "Champ, they say you're truculent." And Muhammad Ali says, I don't know what that is, but if it's good, that's what I am. So I'm a feminist. Yes, that's what I am. I've been knowing that for a long time. I just didn't know that's what they call it. But yeah, that's what I've been for a long time. It ain't no.
Exactly. I think it was it Mae West? Somebody said, I'm not a doormat. I don't
Right.
let myself be treated like a doormat. That was her definition. That was always very funny. So what do you do to stay sane during this race when you're running all day long?
Oh, it is very simple. Since our two other children and I are away at school and one's away in the NBA, I spend time with Crystal and Leo. They keep me grounded. You know, I enjoy riding my bike, city bike, to take in the sights and sounds of the city. And I go to the basketball court, and Leo and I hang out, and Chris and I take walks. So we do things as a family to keep ourselves sane, keep me sane. They're sane, but they got to keep me sane since I'm out here, you know, running for the greatest, most important office that exists, second probably in the country.
Yep, absolutely. So can we start? Tell us what you would do to put women front and center. You know, how do you want to change the landscape for women in the first 4 years? Like, if you could look back in 4 years of a McGuire administration, what do you hope to have accomplished that puts women front and center?
You know, I would like to continue that which I've done in my professional career where women have been front and center. I have not just talked about it. It's actually, I've been about it. I've been a doer about this. I would say my commitment to women is weaved into every aspect of my effort to lead the city. It begins with the team that I've hired to run this campaign. Every major department of my campaign is led by women, primarily women of color, communications, finance, political, field. And I just didn't hire these women. I hired their companies. They run and they're responsible for the creation of hundreds of jobs. So that commitment is prima facie how I would run the administration. One of the first policy items that I shared out to the world about how I viewed the world was a pay equity plan to ensure that women work in all the agencies are paid equally. I'm going to have, as I did when I was in the private sector, have the same thing in the public sector. I'm going to have high-ranking women in my administration, City Hall, and throughout the department, so they enact my vision of a renewed, inclusive New York City. My administration is going to embrace diversity at all levels of hiring. My plan addresses multiple challenges that women face entering the workforce, including pay equities, opportunities in business, MWBEs. How do we get dollars allocated there? And childcare. What do we do about, as my mother was, a single mother who's trying to raise children and also get them educated while raising them? That's important. And the mayor's got to have the leadership, demonstrated leadership and management experience to drive the outcomes when it comes to quality of life issues that affect all New Yorkers, especially for women of color, who are all too often left behind. You got to show that, you got to demonstrate that kind of leadership. And you know what? You got to be held accountable for it. So I want to be held accountable. I'm prepared to have a public scorecard that said, this is my commitment from the outset, and this is how I've been able to fulfill that commitment over a period of time. Hold me accountable. It's not new. This is how I've lived my life, and in a leadership role, this is how I've led. And the only way I've been successful is have the best, smartest, brightest people, women, who are by my side, who advise me how I move forward. And that's what I intend to continue when I become the mayor of the city.
Well, thank you. I like that methodical approach. Taking stuff on, committing to it, putting it down on paper, and being accountable for it.
I want you all to hold me accountable, right? I mean, as a feminist, I want you to hold me accountable, okay?
So let's talk a little bit about education. The poll that I mentioned at the beginning of our members, it was three things, not surprisingly, that really ranked the highest: housing, public safety, and education as top issues. Fixing education, that's befuddled every mayor that has come before you. Why would you be able to fix it? I mean, what do you want to accomplish at the end of your first term? Because there's a lot of things. I mean, New York City doesn't make any national lists to be proud of. Not the lowest dropout rate, not the smallest class size, not the highest reading score, math score. In fact, third graders don't meet I think 50% of third graders don't even meet proficiency standards on math and play. So there is a lot to accomplish, and you certainly can't get it all done in the first 4 years. But what is your plan out the
You
gate?
know, the plan is to fix what is broken. I want to be clear about this. The very few issues about which I care more deeply than education and the lack thereof in our school system in New York City. Total lack. It is random pre-K through 12. We need to transform it. Education is so fundamental to who I am. I understand what it's like for my mother to have worked 3 jobs. And then sometimes she, what difficult to make ends meet in the focus that she had on my getting an education. She eventually became a social worker. So this has been a life of service for her and my family. But education is what got me here. I came to New York with 3 things: a great education, a lot of debt, no money, which is why I love this city so much, because it's given me so much. In education today, it is not working. What you talked about is the people who our children are in the 3rd grade level. So the way this works now, let me tell you, if I randomly take 10 black and brown boys and girls in the 4th grade, 2, maybe 3 can read. 2, maybe 3 can read. If I look at the performance, grades 3 through 8, the entire spectrum, 3 through 8, 70% of black and brown kids are below proficient. Now, if I look at how much we spend $26,000 a year on education. Many of our schools and many of our districts don't have crayons, but don't stop there. We spend $446,000 a year to keep an inmate at Rikers. So explain to me the crisis in which we find ourselves. We created the pipeline. My plan is to transform the way we educate our children so that our children's lives are not determined by their zip code, which today it is. I'm going to have cradle to career for which I'm going to be responsible. And what does that mean? I'm going to start before pre-K, because by the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. So I want to have affordable child care. I want to have child care programs so that our children, all of whom are gifted and talented, can be assessed early. Some move more slowly than others. Let's figure out how we intervene and get them up to speed. So by the time they get to pre-K, they're on schedule. And then this is what I want to do. So this is so fundamental to who we are. I want to guarantee, my count, guarantee that no child leaves the end of a 3rd grade without the ability to read and do math. Why is that? Because all the expert educators will tell you that between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn, and we've lost far too many whom we didn't teach how to read, and we have never remediated. And so I want to ensure that. How am I going to get there? Certify college students, New York City Tutor Corps. During the course of the summer, no child leaves. Retired teachers, existing teachers, no child leaves without the ability to do reading and math. 6th grade, you get exposed to different career opportunities. First, you got to be digitally and technologically illiterate. Coding, programming for our children, all of them. Get exposed to different career opportunities. 8th grade, pathways to a career. Don't start when they're in the 12th grade. Let's start now. 8th grade, exposure to different career opportunities. They can become plumbers and welders, paleontologists or doctors, software engineers, vocational training, workforce training, however we do it, however we describe it, but 8th grade, and you will have opportunity to have a paid summer job, exposed to those career opportunities. By the time you graduate, pathway to a career, you can do one of 3 things. You go to that job career to which you've been exposed and had a paid summer job, and you go to 2-year, 4-year college. But I've been responsible for our children from the cradle to the pathways to success, to a career. And we need that kind of intervention. We need to have the support for the caregivers, especially the mothers. How's it working today that on a Monday you get a call, on a Tuesday you get a call that says on Wednesday we ain't gonna have no class. And you got a choice to either go to work or stay home with your 9 or 10-year-old because you got no help, you got no primary care. Well, I mean, how is that gonna work for you? How did it work? It is a complete, total, unmitigated disaster, otherwise known as a crisis. We need to change it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your passion and your vision, and your idea of, it takes a village to do it all. How are we going to pay for it? And maybe there's opportunities now with what everything's happening federally, but how is your plan to be able to distribute that money, and where are we going to get it?
I'm not convinced that we got a problem with the dollars. We need to spend those dollars more widely. $26,000, and I got kids in District 9 don't have crayons. The dollars we spend more than practically any other city in the country, and we go from pre-K to 12, we rank 19th. So it's not necessarily a matter of dollars, it's how we spend those dollars and how we actually go through and efficiently spend those dollars. Because today we're not doing that. So yes, we may need more dollars to fund more of the programs that are necessary because we fail educating our children. So we need more dollars to catch up. But we need to spend those dollars more wisely than what we're spending. And we need to make sure that those dollars ensure that we have the highest quality education in every zip code. And I could care less as to whether that's a district school, a magnet school, a parochial school, or a charter school. I want the best education that we can provide our children in New York City. That's what I'm fighting for. I want to be clear. That is my battle. I want Lil Ray Ray and Pookie and Black Nose Jack to get the same kind of, and Shanique would get the same education that I was fortunate to get. It's all about giving the opportunity. Without that, all the stuff that we see in the social unrest, it's going to continue. It ain't going to stop. We need to make certain that we have a plan, and we need to have somebody who can go execute on that plan. Right now, we got a plan. It's more the same. And that what they call in the world of education, and maybe in the real world, insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Ain't going to have no different result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the figures that you laid out with, how much we spend on a kid per year in a classroom and how much to incarcerate someone at Rikers is just shocks the conscious that this would be the case. There has been the issues about kind of the school to prison pipeline, and we see more and more young Black girls whom it affects. What about police interaction and that in our schools? How would you try to mitigate that path?
We mitigate the path by investing the right way. Mitigate the path by giving our children opportunities, visible opportunities, by giving them summer jobs. Mitigate the path by investing in community centers. Mitigate the path by making certain that our children have access to broadband and mobile, and they have a tablet that works. Mitigating the path so that we can have teachers who can be responsive, who themselves are in the classroom and understand now that we've gone digital, now we're going to be back in school, but at least how to manage, mitigate so we get the mental health care professionals in our schools. We got a standard of across the country of one counselor to every 250 students. Today in New York City, it's one counselor for every 700 students. And the number of challenges that we're going to have emotionally that our children are going to encounter that they today have without some outlet, some kind of therapy, some kind of counselor with whom they can have a conversation, develop a relationship. That pipeline that you've just described is robust. We got an inventory just waiting to fill. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make sure that we mitigate that today by investing. We know how to do this. We just have never done it. Not in any way systemically. We've been systemic in creating the crisis, and we've been systemic in perpetuating the crisis by the people who are now on stage deciding that they're all of a sudden going to do something different. Got 100 years of experience and combined with all the other mayoral candidates, and we've gone backwards in education, gone backwards in housing, gone backwards in the economy, gone backwards in healthcare. We've gone backwards. We're in quicksand, and we keep going backwards. All these people promoting what they could have done but didn't do.
A lot of them would say there's so many contentious issues. I mean, even just reading about preparing for this series about education throughout the years in New York City. I mean, in terms of segregation, the largest march ever was a march across the Brooklyn Bridge when we tried to desegregate schools. Then one of the biggest riots was when all the teachers, all the students, everybody did a boycott of schools when in favor of segregation. It's like everything's contentious. What in your career, how does that compare in the work that you've done in your career to deal with these kind of politically contentious issues when you've got such strongly opposing forces? how do you bring people together? How do you deal with that?
It's called leadership. It's called leadership. It's called being able to move forward with a vision, unencumbered by being part of a political system. I'm an outsider. I don't owe any political favors. And the reason I was able to stay in the position I stayed in for longer than anybody else in the history of the corporate world is because people knew that I was going to call it fairly. The reason that I had people relying on my judgment and trusting me is because they knew I was always going to do what's in their best interest. I could not have lasted without being able to bring differing parties together to a table where many of them didn't want to be put together. They were not on speaking terms. And to be able to do that and to be able to lead a group of talented women and men to do that across the globe gives you some sense that I have the unique capabilities to do that. And what people do respect, if that is, you have a vision, and that vision is a true north vision, that while they may disagree, they will understand that the agenda is solely for the benefit of our children. And when people see that, and when I use a bully pulpit or the mayor's office as a person whose life has been guided by education, we'll be able to bring the differing parties together. And am I a bit naive on this? No, I'm not, because I understand how contentious the issue is, but I also understand that unless somebody's standing for these children today, it's going to remain contentious. And we're going to remain deeper. We're going to go deeper and deeper into the crisis. I got a COVID generation now, 1 to 2 years lost already. Mm-hmm. What are we doing about it? It ain't a Band-Aid. This is a little mini Band-Aid on a gaping wound that gets wider. We're gaping. Blood here. We need to step in here and do something, because otherwise that pipeline they describe and those jails they talking about building, listen, they're going to be filled up quicker than we can imagine.
Thank you. Let's move to housing. The moratorium on evictions has been pushed back several times. When it is lifted, this could be a huge problem for so many, from foreclosures and bankruptcies to homelessness, increasing that. How will you negotiate, mitigate, and handle that? All the players that are going to be affected, and making sure that people stay in their homes, and that small landlords and banks are able to weather it all.
So the first thing that we have to do, and you're right to point it out, it is a emergent issue. It already exists as a big issue. It's going to be that much more prevalent if we don't deal with it today. And what would I do in specific? First, I got to prevent. So my plan is prevention, services, and then moving out, transition into a home. And so prevention, I will expand the eviction foreclosure legal assistance. I'll increase the amount that the city currently spends on rental subsidies and vouchers from $130 million or so up to $400 million. I got to keep more New Yorkers in their homes. That includes undocumented immigrants who would otherwise face eviction in their homes. And I got to help others exit the shelter system for good. You know, I was at Parsons and Archer Avenue at a subway station early one morning. I was talking to a homeless man there who's in a wheelchair. He says, "You know, Ray, I was scheduled to be here for 2 to 3 months. I've been here for 2 to 3 years. I don't want to be homeless, but going into the shelters, it's dangerous for me, and I really fear for my life. So shelters is not the answer. Continue to build these shelters is not the answer." He says, "All I want is just a roof over my head of some sort, and give me a hot pot, and give me a small refrigerator, a place that I can call my own, with walls that are my walls. Doesn't have to be big. Just give me something that." So we need to make sure that New Yorkers, that we give them a place where they can call home, they can have their dignity and live with some dignity. So that would be what I would do.
Would that be your signature policy, converting hotels to apartments, or?
No, that's not part of that included, but listen, we spend $2 billion a year on it. And what it's going to take to reduce this, we have to build affordable housing. You got 40 some odd % of New Yorkers who what we call rent burden. That means they pay 50 to 60% of their income in rent. So my plan is, in my housing plan, you can see in detail in rayformayor.com, is to increase our housing stock from its current levels, and I want to increase that by 10% or 350,000 units over the next 8 years. It's going to double the amount of city capital funds being spent on housing. $2.5 billion each year, building housing that is affordable for people who make less than 50% of AMI, area median income, $102,000. People make less than 50% of that, so that no New Yorker has to pay more than 30% of her or his income in rent. So I do that. I would convert up to 10% of the city's hotels into affordable housing stock. I got to upbuild the building codes and reduce the red tape. And the other thing I'm going to do is, because this has become a city where we have a number of our seniors and elders, I'm going to build affordable housing for the seniors. I'm going to end senior homelessness. I'm going to dedicate up to $500 million in capital city funding. It's going to be double the current rate. Build enough housing, 3,000 new homes per year. I'm going to prioritize older New Yorkers for rental assistance, targeted especially at the single adults or the childless couples. I get to keep them in their home. And I got to reduce the cost of construction, all of which is outlined. But the key focus here is to finally build affordable homes. What we built for the past administration are homes for people who make 80 to 100+% of the area median income. Not affordable. We need to build deeply affordable housing. And we need to make sure that the housing is not ghettoized. Mm-hmm. There's an example of what I'm describing here, Sonia, in the Bronx, called the Bronx Commons, 163rd Street in Melrose, where we have 300 and some odd units. Rent goes from $225 a month to $1,999 a month. It's populated by those who are formerly homeless, to those who can pay for a 3-bedroom. It's got facilities for the elders. It's got a gymnasium, powered in many ways by solar panels. And you know what else it's got? It's got a concert hall right there, a concert hall. And you know what else it's got? It's got restaurants. So this is a place where people can live in dignity, and they haven't ghettoized the floors. Get somebody who's formerly homeless living in the same floor. So that's how you have to think about it. That's how we have to approach it. So we can do it, and that's part of my plan. Homelessness, housing, from homelessness to home ownership. And the other thing I'm going to do is, for those who have the capacity, who have the decent, well-paying jobs, they can own the homes. I'm going to have a buyer assistance program for those people who make up to 120% of AMI. So we can support them getting a down payment so they can actually go and buy homes and afford the homes.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I mean, that's the other point of it. It's like young New Yorkers not being able to fulfill the American dream. I mean, we don't want in New York City that's the case. And we've already spent the $2 billion on homelessness and shelters. So thank you so much for that. It's all very inspiring. And, time is moving so quickly, but we got to talk about safety. We've had such a surge, right, in gun violence,
yes,
and robberies and assaults. I mean, just the last few weeks ago with the shootings in Times Square. I mean, even the fear of crime can have detrimental effects on our communities and our economy and our tourism base. And last year there was 15 shootings in one day in July. And shootings that continue unabated to be up, I think, 70-some%. Are you nervous about this summer? I mean, crime goes up in the summer. What would you do if you were mayor right now? Or what advice would you have for Mayor de Blasio to prevent a crime wave from coming? And in general, what is your plan for public safety moving forward?
So, fundamental question. That is the most fundamental responsibility New York City has, to keep our citizens safe. Right now, we're abdicated that responsibility, and we continue to fail. The fact is, no safety, no city. Like no jobs, no city, no safety, no city. So the thing we need to do is to approach the violence. I'm going to tackle the gun violence head on, ensure better quality of life in New York. At the same time, I got to tackle the root causes of so much of the current disorder. I'm going to shift. I'm not for a defund. I want to be clear. I'm going to shift resources within the budget to increase the number of officers that are focused on seizing illegal guns and preventing, investigating, and prosecuting gun crimes. I'm going to make certain that we get the community more involved, broader community policing and efforts in the 10 precincts where we see most of the crime taking place. As you know, 90 to 95% of the gun violence is perpetrated on young men and women of color. I will invest in the community-based violence interrupters, the crisis management teams. So I got to take the guns off the street. I'm also going to hit the I-95 iron pipeline. So I'm going to use more intelligence. I will not use stop and frisk. By the way, some are advocating stop and frisk At the height of stop and frisk, we had 624,000 black and brown boys, some women, who were stopped and frisked. 90% of them were innocent. So that is not the way. Others are advocating that, but the trauma that has created on someone's life is enormous. I will make sure that we're more aggressive. We use intelligence. And by the way, after stop and frisk was ceased, we had a much safer city than we had since the 1950s. So that's that. I will also address the issue that we're having in mental illness. Those mentally ill New Yorkers who create a threat to themselves and a threat to us. And there in my policing plan, I'm going to have emergency social services office dedicated with healthcare professionals dedicated to making sure that we focus on those who are mentally ill in the subways and in the precincts, deployed either at the same time before the NYPD. I'm going to make sure that takes place 24 hours, 7 days a week. I'm also going to make sure that we invest in the assisted outpatient treatment. Kendra's Law, in a budget of $240 million, we spend 1.3. I'm going to take that to 5 million at least so that we can exercise Kendra's Law more effectively. And as you know, it's a law that allows us to intervene when people are not taking their medications. I'm going to invest in that. I'm going to invest in more safety in psychiatric beds. We cut 600 to 650 of those out of the system. We need to reinvest in that. And I also need to make sure that we have counselors for our children. And then ultimately, I want to be held accountable for how New York City Police Department works. I'm going to have a deputy mayor for public safety, whose responsibility is the day-to-day management of the NYPD. I'm going to make certain we have chain of command accountability. One or more officers involved in an infraction, the entire chain is held accountable. I've talked about my Emergency Social Services Bureau, my core of mental health care professionals. CCRB gets full investigative authority. Rather than take 48 days for the CCRB to review video cam footage, I'm going to have them do it in 48 hours. And they're going to have a complete review of the file. They will make a recommendation to the head of the commissioner, and based on that commissioner's response, I will have ultimate authority. I may have to take other action. So that's how I'm going to think about this. I'm also going to make sure that I work with the state for those repeat offenders who are felons who get caught with an illegal handgun, put them back in jail. For the repeat offenders who we know have some conviction, put them back in jail. We have to do whatever we can to make the streets safe. We got to invest in our neighborhoods, as I've talked about before, to help prevent that pipeline that we've discussed earlier. So I have a plan to make certain that I get the guns off the street, that police protect me and not profile me, and that we put those who are mentally ill in the care of mental health care professionals and get them off the street so they're not a threat to themselves and not a threat to New Yorkers. Thank you so much. One thing that I would love to talk to you more when you are mayor is about focusing on gender-based crime. It's one of the things that we've done it now for a number of years is really creating a relationship with the NYPD, having regularly scheduled meetings with the commissioner. And we've plodded along, but there's so much more change that needs to take place. And to have make it a real priority, make it transparent and accountable would be really important. We just did a survey of the 20 largest direct service providers to victims of crimes against women, gender-based crime. And unfortunately, the quality of the Special Victims Division investigations varied widely. Not one organization said that SVD handles sexual assault or rape well most of the time. That's just one stat that I will leave you with. I think the good news, particularly for someone like you who's with your background, is like, here's the problem. This is actually good news. It's like they're doing it well some of the time. So how do we improve it so that it's 100% of the time? So this is really an area that is really important to focus on, and we hope that we get a chance to work with you more on that. And I'd love to know, what are you looking for in a police commissioner? I'm looking for a commissioner that will, whom I trust to implement my agenda, who's going to drive down crime, who's going to hold the officers accountable when needed. In cases of serious misconduct, I will be prepared to make the final decision if I disagree with the commissioner's ruling. This is somebody who's got to be above reproach, who can act independently, and who can lead. I'm looking for a leader. I'm not looking for somebody who's part of a system. We have people today who are advocating, who are running for office, who continue to be part of the system. It is broken. It's broken. We need to fix it. We need something new here. In order for the police to have the respect between the community and the police needs to be restored. The only way that's going to happen is have a leader of the NYPD who can command respect in the neighborhoods as well as amongst the police officers. That's what I'm going to have. Who's not a pawn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. Let's take a few minutes, 5 more minutes, for some questions from the audience. This is one that's always front and center, and it's about childcare. And you mentioned it before, how important it is. But what is your plan to make childcare more affordable for working moms, particularly those who need to work to make ends meet, and for those who need child care for school-age children, even if it's for a few hours after school?
So I know the importance of childcare. Having been raised by a single mother, I didn't know my dad. So I know that we need to make it affordable. So I'm not certain that, but for my grandparents, that would have been the case. Mm-hmm. In terms of we couldn't afford it, my mother couldn't have afforded it. So absent the grandparents there, and even today, given the challenges that we have in the educational system, that is not going to prove to be, it's necessary but not sufficient. So we know that they're under the federal stimulus package, that there's going to be more child care that's made available. I would continue to look at the cost of child care to make it affordable and to make it available. It doesn't exist in many of our boroughs and many of our jurisdictions, and it should be available. And we need to make sure that we take care of the parents, the mothers as well. So yes, affordable child care. 2, more facilities that are available, that are facilities that are safe places for our children, and more child care experts who can assess our children while they're interacting, to give us a real assessment of just how they are developing. And I would do this early. I'd start at 0, as I said, from 0 to 4, and make it so that it is an opportunity for our mothers primarily to interact with the child caregivers, to make sure that their children are safe. And we get to the point where they can go to preschool and interact with children, that it's done in a safe way, so that when they get to work, that they don't worry about, I say worry, every mother worries every moment for her child or for her children, as does clearly my better 3/4 and my mother. And I understand how it is that women think about their children. We need to give them some relief. And that relief comes in making sure they can afford it. And that's a place of safety, that they know their children are being taken care of and nurtured, and that they're developing with care.
Thank you so much. I have one question that's asked: will you commit to taking police out of schools or reducing them significantly and adding more social workers and support resource personnel instead, which you've partially answered before?
Let me be clear. I think we need to have more social workers in our schools. I'd much rather have our children interact with social workers than I would have them interact with the NYPD. Having said that, I do recognize that in many of our jurisdictions, we're going to need to make sure, and I would rely on the principals to see what they thought was the appropriate amount of care and attention given from law enforcement. I'm still really anxious and nervous about having our kids interact every single day with somebody who is law enforcement. So I would attempt to reduce that where I don't see the threat. And, I'm quite sensitive to this. As a Black man with Black children, I'm quite sensitive to how they interact with whom they interacted every single day.
Thank you. Well, here's a good question to end on. Is why do you want this job at this most challenging time in the city? And beyond effective management, how do you plan to inspire New Yorkers to reimagine our city, the city we all live?
Why do I want this job? Is because I love this city. As I mentioned, it's given me everything. It's where I met my better 3/4 wife. Is where we raised our 3 children. Leo, who was 8, Ella, who's 18, just recently got into the college of her choice, Harvard. So we're excited about that. Cole, who was drafted first round into the NBA, now starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. So it's given me everything personally. It's given me everything professionally. I came into this world of finance, and there was 1 or 2 people on the planet who looked like me. And I had to climb the ladder. I had to break down the barriers of what was clearly conscious, and now they dress it up and call it unconscious bias. I had to get through that to get to one of the most senior positions that exist in that field and compete every single day to stay there. And so the city's been great to give me that opportunity. But the thing that I'm so worried about today is that the vast majority of our children, New Yorkers, don't have that opportunity. They just don't. And so if there's ever a moment in time when I can take my lived experiences and what I've been able to accomplish in the city and the fabric of the city in arts education, arts and culture, and in education, and in healthcare, bring all that together for the benefit of those who made this such an extraordinary experience for my family and me, then I should do that. Right? To whom much is given, so the scripture says much is required. And right now, I don't see amongst the other candidates the ability to have affected the change. They had the opportunity, 100 years of experience, 100 years of experience, and it's the same movie playing at your local city hall. Ain't nothing changed. They wrote, produced, directed, acted in it, and continue to. And all they're going to give us is a new freaking headline to the same movie with the same outcome. If I got the opportunity to take those gifts that I've been given by this city and do in the public what I've done in the private, then he's going to say at the end of my journey, well done, thou good and faithful servant. That's what's going to happen. Isn't that the most important thing that any of us have in that dash? The time we get here and the time we leave? Isn't it to have affected people's lives in a way that their lives are much better off having interacted with you? If I can have the gift of leadership demonstrated in a way that I've done before, I can make New Yorkers' lives better, then isn't that what this journey is all about? That's why I'm running for office. I love this city. Unless I do it, it ain't gonna happen. Ain't no cavalry coming, ain't no plan B. We need to do this together. And if it is the case that women should have their rightful positions as leaders in this city alongside me, advising me, then shouldn't we do whatever we can to make sure that opportunity is real, that pay equity, that gender equity, that child care is affordable, that our children get educated? Shouldn't we avail ourselves of that opportunity without any favors being owed? Shouldn't we do that? And that's why I'm running for office. That's why I need your support.
Thank you so much, Ray McGuire. We really appreciate you taking the time with us today. Everyone, we are going to have this recording online. We will share it and blast it out. Please send it to your friends. Thank you so much. You can sign off if you like.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off. The feminists are signing off now.
Yes. Thank you so much. Everyone else, if you want to stick around for another 2 minutes, we've got a couple slides about ranked choice voting and what's coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I was trying to share my video at the same time here. Thank you so much for joining us for this series. Again, as Sonia mentioned, we are posting all the video of our interviews. I just shared in the chat our website link. You can read the full candidate questionnaires at that location. You can also go to our Compare the Candidates link, where we've selected some of the top questions that we know our members are most interested in learning about, and you can compare the candidates on the questions on the issues that most matter to you. And we'll be sending out these videos to everyone as well, so you can share them and watch them. I just want to remind folks that if you want to be the first to get our voter guides and endorsements and also connect with us for on the ground get out the vote opportunities, we hope that you'll consider becoming a member at nownyc.org/member. It is our members who are able to get the most direct and comprehensive information from us on the upcoming election, so we hope that you'll sign up. And I also want to just remind you about what's next. So we have completed our mayoral candidate interviews in that series, but we're going to continue to put women front and center in the city. And there's a huge, there's also a historic election and opportunity happening for Manhattan DA. And we have endorsed Tali for Hardy and Weinstein in that race. And we are going to be hearing from her at the same time next Thursday. So we hope that you will continue to join us for our Women Front and Center series as we start talking to other candidates and other issues. And you can mark your calendar now for next Thursday at noon, where we will be hearing all about Tali's plans, in particular to establish a new gender-based violence bureau, and her other plans for transforming the Manhattan DA's office. In addition, we had some folks in the chat mentioning that yes, tomorrow is the last day to register to vote in the primary. We have that information on our website, so you can find out how to do that. So make sure that if you are not registered, or check on 5 friends and make sure they're registered and they're going to take part in this election. The second mayoral debate is going to be airing on ABC 7, June 2nd. So that's coming up next week. I believe it will be in person. So we finally have the opportunity to watch the candidates speaking with each other in person. So that's going to be exciting. And then just again, so you have it at front of mind, our early voting is starting June 12th and the election day is June 22nd. So we look forward to continuing to keep you informed on what's happening in races across the city in this really monumental election. And thank you so much for being with us today. So have a great day, everyone, and we hope to see you next week.